Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I am Brigid Burke, and today is the 4th of March, 2025, and I see that Joanne's on already and Kathleen is on already. So good morning to both of you, and there might be somebody else on already too. I have some good news about this live stream is that now, as of yesterday, we do have somebody who is signed on as a moderator. So this is great. Mango Witch has decided that you messaged me about, we were messaging about something else. And then she had said, oh, I'm happy to be a mod on your, if I'm on. So, and Alistair is on. Good morning. And Alex is on. Good morning. So we do have a moderator now. Now, the thing is, she may or may not be here for all live streams. So the ones that she's here for, she will definitely help moderate spam comments and bots and things that come in, which is most of the kind of stuff you see invading a lot of the time. And so anyway, that's really helpful to me. So I just want to say thank you to her. Big shout out to her for agreeing to do that. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, because it's because I think those things come in because they're meant to be distracting. And to me, it's like, it's not so much that the comments themselves are distracting, but because I have to go in and push this button and push this, it's like, I need this to be easier if I want to just remove things that are not appropriate. So it is definitely easier if somebody else does it. So so we'll see how well this goes. So this morning here is actually quite gray. It's quite gray and the grass is quite dead and looking, and because it's, well, although my snowdrops are coming out in the front. So you can actually see that there is little bits of, flowery life starting to come back. And it's, and last night I didn't actually sleep that well last night. I had a lot of things going on, again, dreams, the usual stuff. That's right. I was going to email people about yesterday's dream, but we will get there. And if you weren't here for that conversation, basically I had some long, complicated dreams last night, and I just thought, okay, I would kind of like some interpretation before the next dream workshop. So I was going to email it to everybody who's normally, who has at different times has participated in the dream workshop. And if you want to send me back your thoughts about it, then I would give that. And whoever does, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's everybody. I would give people a free place in whatever dream workshop they want. It's like a free ticket to one of the future ones. So and I meant to do that yesterday. Actually, yesterday, there was a lot of messages coming in. And in fact, there's still 2 hours worth of messages from a friend who's just moved that I have on one of my voice note apps that I'm like, I haven't even gotten to her yet. And I know, Kathleen, you've sent me a message, and there's one other one that I have on my list that I'm like, okay, I haven't responded to this person yet either. So I will be catching up. I do have a meeting this morning. Haven't slept much, had a crisis call. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. There's quite a bit going on this morning. So I'm going to try to keep this to exact time today. Sometimes we do go a bit over, but because I have this call at 10 and Suna is on. Good morning. So we'll see where we end up here. Now, I do want to tell people this this kind of thing. No rush, Kathleen's saying. Okay, yeah, no, definitely. But I definitely want to get back. And some of it, too, is when I see it on my phone, if I want to make a longer response, I am not one of those people who can there's some people who can type so fast on their phones. I'm like, no, I'm not one of those people. I have to be able to open it up on my laptop and then open up the account and open up. So, yeah, it takes me some time. We also had somebody on here the other morning, I think, who was a new subscriber to my channel and who kind of waved, and I just, apologies that I didn't acknowledge that yesterday, but it was just that I do this from Restream, so I only look at my YouTube channel occasionally. Eventually I'll go in because I have 2 channels, and tomorrow, by the way, we're going to have a Katonia live stream on the other channel at noon as well, so I will be doing that in a couple of different places. But yeah, quite a busy week going on. And it was very interesting because I got, my Azrael messages from this morning were something to the effect of, it was basically Dod's Zin Oomph, which is kind of like, I'm angry at vexing. The Zin is like waters. And what he's saying is I'm getting frustrated with emotions. As he kept telling me over and over again, it's like, what is it? All Gohus ballot. I speak what is just. I speak what is true. So it's, yeah. So, so it's kind of one of these, I do what is just and I do what is true. I say what is true. And he says it to me over and over again. And I said to him, like, well, it's not like I don't believe what you're saying is true. And he's like, no, but he's basically what it came down to after several, that he's just extremely annoyed that there's a lot of messages going around right now, probably from different people who are interpreting the astrology, maybe different people who receive messages from their guides, from other angels, whatever, who are basically saying like, oh, everything's terrible, the world's going to end, it's going to be so bad, blah, blah, blah. There's like all of this. And he's like, and he's basically saying, look, yes, we're moving into a new space. Yes, some things are going to change and go away, but it's going to be a better space. Like, I'm speaking the truth. And he's like, why is the collective all like, no, I don't want to let go of what's going on in the past? And he's like, why, it's kind of the whole thing of like, the house is on fire, and it's like, why do you want to stay in it? So there's a whole change that's coming in. And he was expressing, that's not normal to have him express that much frustration in these communications. I was like, okay, he was kind of almost like he could, but it's not, because again, because he kept, pointing to the idea that he's using the phrase destiny, right? This is what's destined. And this is like we see the Wheel of Fortune a lot in our readings, right? This is something that's happening that is beyond the control of anything anybody can do. So everybody's trying to do all these things to try to stop it from happening. And he's like, why are you doing that? He's like, stop doing that. So, yeah. And also it goes back to and actually it's funny. I heard it a couple of times yesterday too. As REM says, it's the end of the world as I know it and I feel fine. Yeah, that's right. And actually I do love that song. So yeah, good point. Good soundtrack for this time, for sure. And yeah, and it's going to be, things are going to be different. And that is something I have heard consistently, though, is you really need to wait till April to see what's really changing here. Like everything going on this month. I know there's things have a lot of people freaked out, and yeah. And I mean, it's not that there isn't justified anger and that there aren't things like that, but this idea of people weeping over what's going to be lost. He's like, why are you doing that? Like whatever you lose, you're going to get something like 10 times better. Like, why are you freaking out about this? So seems to be a lot of energy of that. And I found myself thinking this morning, because there was a lot of stuff coming up around the South Node. Now, we know that collectively the South Node right now is in Virgo. And of course, Virgo is that kind of worrisome energy, right? It's that energy of, in its, we'll just say in its, on the spectrum of aspects of Virgo, that is one of the ones that can be problematic, shall we say. Because sometimes worry is a good thing. Sometimes you do need to worry about stuff, right? So, yeah, so it's interesting. So we have this this worry that we have, but and of course Virgo is an earth sign. Virgo is very routine. We talked about this yesterday. So we want to kind of hang on to things the way they are, and that sometimes can be as frustrating. But remember too, like Venus is retrograde, so that's going to be tangling with our ideas about security, and Mercury is going to go retrograde. And by the way, for those of you who know me and are in the workshops and everything, which I think is probably everybody who's left on here, I feel like a lot of the other people who, or bots that were floating in and out, might have left by this point. I told people that I was moving into Venus K2. Well, last night when I was up thinking about stuff, I pulled out my the Yotish that I had done back in, I'm trying to remember the last time I had it done. It might have been 10 years ago, but nonetheless, it was a full chart. There are Vedic charts that are done with another software. I want to say it's called Parahamsas or I'm not getting the name exactly right, but it's the guy who invented basically Vedic astrology, or who wrote about it. It's his Light is the name of the software. And so this is what I usually get when you go to a Yotish, at least in this country, and it uses the South Indian style of charts. And those are really good because they give you, I usually tell people they're Atmakaraka and they're Amatya Karaka, but it goes into all the other details and a lot of the subcharts. So it's very, very useful software, very expensive software, which is why I don't own it. But when I looked at that, when I looked at my Vimshatari Dasha in that, it says, no, you're actually, and actually tomorrow, March 5th, tomorrow, I'm entering Venus, Mercury, Mercury. And I'm like, great, I'm entering Venus, Mercury, Mercury as Venus is retrograde and Mercury's about to go retrograde. Sweet. But but it's interesting because any Mercury dashas are often associated with learning, with becoming a student, with learning, with trying to, gain more knowledge of something. And Venus for me is in the 12th house. So for me, that has to do with foreign travel. So I thought that was rather interesting as well. But I don't enter Venus K2 until next year. So it's going to be closer to, maybe closer even to 2028, because that's not a very long phase. But I have been in Venus Saturn all this time. So that might explain some things. So yeah, I don't know. There was something that I was reading in the one. I don't think I was reading it. It might have just been reading the Yogini rather than the main dashas. So I don't know. There was something slightly off about what I was reading in the other. So yeah, interesting that was coming up. But I think it's in this context too that we're talking about this South Node kind of energy, because mine happens to be in Taurus. And what we're trying to, so okay, there's our natal South Node, and then there's the collective South Node. There's definitely a push here to let go of the past. There's definitely a push to let go of things. But I also found myself thinking about Rahu Ketu, okay, which is, and I think I've mentioned in the Vedic conception, Rahu Ketu is actually two parts of a single demon or a single Ashura. And this Ashura, and I thought about this particular Ashura, and the name I'm not remembering, it begins with an S. But this Ashura has said that it was okay. I realized this Ashura, even though it is an Ashura and not a human, this Ashura definitely is kind of the, I don't know. I feel like it is it represents humans in some way, that it represents the human mindset, because, or at least certain types of human mindsets, which I don't know. I suppose all the devas and Ashuras are aspects of our psychology. But this seems to be a pretty central one, because this is an Ashura who sneaks in among the gods because they want to be immortal. Now, how many people talk about, now, I don't know. Personally, I don't want to be immortal. I don't know why anybody, this whole thing of like, yes, we want to live forever. We want to live to be 200. Like, why? Like, I don't get that. I don't understand why people want to live so long. Like why you have to go all this high maintenance stuff to keep your body going. It's just, when it's your time, it's your time. Like, just let go of this body because you'll have another one. But there's this real attachment to this. And I feel like that particular Ashura represents that and sneaks in among the gods and manages to get some of the nectar of immortality. But then when Vishnu discovers this, or sometimes it's another deity, depending on the version, cuts him in half, cuts this one in half. So it becomes a head and a tail. And I said, that's really the condition of our society. We're split. Our head's in one place, and, I've said we're not grounded, we're not connected to the earth. That's because the head's floating off someplace else, and the rest of the body is kind of running around separately, because we're very split. We're very dualistic. We think of things in terms of, we think of everything in terms of difference rather than its unity. We kind of think about everything in that way. And Rahu becomes a particular issue in that because it's all head. It's all head. And that's kind of the thing that I felt like Azrael was talking about this morning. Like, you're all head. You're not attached to your body. You're not grounded. You're not acknowledging, maybe that's another way of looking at acknowledging the South Node, as acknowledging that maybe is where your body is. Maybe that's where your security was, where your familiarity was. And where does that connect in with where you're going? Those of you who have taken my node class, I know that when we've talked about I have this book called The Node Book that I use to help with the interpretations of the nodes. But the author of that book, I think his name is Kevin Burke, he said that, you have to, we don't want to see it like South Node bad, North Node good. Like that seems to be the way we try to do it in Western astrology. And it's like, no, they work together. It's the South Node represents that aspect of things that you don't want to be stuck in. And interestingly, in Vedic astrology, South Node has to do with liberation, with what you're giving up. But the North Node too, it's kind of like, okay, this is where we have our ideas and where we move on, but you don't want to be all stuck in your head either. And yeah, the way that our minds work, yeah, the word that I frequently get is napia, which is like a double-edged sword, because we, on the one hand, we can think things through. Okay, on the one hand, we're able to we are able to be conscious and aware of things in a way that perhaps a lot of other species may not be. They may just go, and again, I don't know that we tend to think that that's better. Like, oh, well, we're not like the animals who just move around on instinct. We are, we are aware and we can think things through. And I'm like, well, is that better though? Is that better? Is it better to always to be aware? And I don't necessarily mean like ignorance is bliss, but the thing is that disconnect between the head and the body is where, again, how many times have we talked about with human design? Like your solar plexus may be your authority, your sacrum may be your authority, and those have to do with your instincts, with your emotions, with your deep intuition, with things like that. These are the areas that are their authority, that tell you the truth about what's going on in spite of what your eyes see. We always look at what's in the head, It's like, oh, I can see it with my eyes, therefore it's real. And this is the way we're conditioned. So if we have a reading or we do something and it says, oh no, this is going to be different, or this is what's going on, we go, oh, okay. But we want some kind of external validation that that's true. Now, in time, if it's something that's going to come in time, then we'll get that external validation. But it gets back to the idea of trust. We don't trust our bodies. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our way of being. We don't listen to that. We don't listen to instinct. No, because the head is the thing we're supposed to listen to. You're supposed to be logical and rational, right? Always be logical and rational. And again, I'm not saying we should never be logical and rational. I mean, obviously there's but it's the head without the body. When the rationality and everything is cut off from the rest of it, then you don't know what you're not working in harmony with yourself. I guess that's the way to put it. You're not working harmoniously with yourself and you're not trusting yourself. And if we get back to the idea of Venus and Venus retrograde having to do with love and to relate with relationships and with being together, then basically we've often talked about that having to do with respect and trust, right? This has to do with relationships of all types are built on respect and trust, like real relationships, not ones where this is a convenient relationship, a convenient business relationship or a convenient networking opportunity. I think that's another problem too with relationships, is that frequently we're trained to look at people as in that kind of corporate thinking as a means to an end. Whether I really get on with you or not, it might be financially beneficial for me to be connected to somebody, right? That kind of thinking. That's very salesman type thinking. It's just kind of, where they come and they act like they're your best friend and they've known you forever. And the reality is that they don't. And I mean, that is part of the way sales and marketing and all that kind of works. But as long as you recognize that this is not like, okay, you guys are BFFs now. I mean, it's just, okay, this is a business transaction, and it can be that. But if we tend to think of our relationships outside of the working sphere as being like that too, as opportunistic in that way, that is also a problem. That's also a disconnect. You have to be grounded in trust. And the thing you have to trust is what's in the body. So you have to be able to trust what's in the body. I found myself thinking about the nature of the gods today too, because that was something that was connected to this. The idea, when I talk about ancient deities, okay, I will tell people, one of the things I teach when I teach afterlife, ancient afterlife stuff is, one of the 5 characteristics of ancient afterlife beliefs is that you're not dealing with gods. Gods are not moral. Okay, they're not, there are sacrifices that are made to gods, but again, these are more the way in which you say, okay, these forces exist, these forces are greater than me. And it kind of follows the principle of what they call xenia, or guest friendship in the Greek. It's where you welcome this influence and you offer it gifts in the hopes that it will be nice to you. Because ultimately, these are forces that there's no rational reason why they should be nice to you. This is just okay, this is how I would negotiate a stranger, so this is how I'm going to negotiate this other that I'm encountering, right? Is to do it that way. So there's this idea of, that's where you get into eventually later the idea of the pact, P-A-C-T, the pact is the idea that, I'm going to give you something and you're going to do something for me. The idea of devotion as such doesn't really exist. Okay, it's not something that exists in those kinds of relationships. You're not, there's not this level of devotion that occurs. And but we tend to think of it that way, because if you think about God as one, then you tend to think of each of these gods as somehow being ultimate in their own way and needing to be worshipped in that kind of a way. But they're not. But it's not like that. It's just these are the things that you flow with. And I mention this because I feel like these are the forces that are more connected to the body than to the head. I feel like Plato and the philosophers tried to connect this a lot to the mind. But these are the forces of our day-to-day life. This is our day-to-day psychology. This is our ego psychology. This is our behavior. This is they tend to represent those kind of forces that are around us, not just in the physical world, but also in the mental world. This is what we do. And I think it's important to remember that. But there's certain, and there's my answer, says Kathleen. Okay. So I answered it for you here. I'll still see if there's any more of your question. But yeah, so they're the forces that are here. And I know people will sometimes be devoted to one aspect or another. Or sometimes you will have, again, people who practice paganism may connect in with certain energies, and they may work with them for a very long time. But these are energies that are kind of they represent one thing. They have a certain function or a certain purpose. A lot of times, and the interactions that you see in mythology are really the way in which these forces kind of interact with each other. But ultimately, these are the things that people encounter, and you have relationships with these kinds of beings as you need to. Okay, as you need to. You never want to disrespect them. Okay, but if we look at them as reflections of our psychological forces, then we have to think about the idea of having respect for those forces, not being necessarily afraid of those forces. Of course, if they've done us dirty, then maybe we would be. But so it becomes down to a question of balance. So I was talking about the guest friendship thing. This is where I was going with this. The other aspect of this that you see, even though you don't see morality and ethics as we see it per se, there's the idea of DK. DK, D-I-K-E, Greek word meaning justice. And that is a word that comes up a lot, right? We've been seeing it. That's the representation of Libra, right? The scales of balance. And we also remember that is also Venus ruled. So yeah, it's this idea of coming into relationship with the other and also coming into relationship with ourselves and putting those pieces back together, because there's a whole lot here about trying to keep things in balance. It's not that, emotions good, logic bad, or vice versa. It's a matter of how do you keep those things in balance. And again, it's the same conditions that you have to be able to love somebody. You have to have respect and you have to have trust, primarily of yourself. And then if you have it for yourself, you therefore have it for other people, or instinctively you will trust yourself if somebody is doing something and you're saying, oh, you know what, maybe I shouldn't trust this, or maybe I should back away from this. The thing first that you have to trust first is your own gut feeling. Because not everybody out there is nice. Not everybody out there has your back or has your best interest. But you navigate your way through that space by knowing how to trust yourself, trusting those forces within yourself, respecting those forces within yourself. And I often feel that, now again, I'm not simply saying that pagan gods are just these are just, a metaphor for your thoughts. I mean, that's one way you could look at it, but I think they're more than that. I think life as we know it is much more complex. Again, we tend to compartmentalize and say, well, this is my thoughts about it, and then this is what the outside world shows me and what my eyes see. So this is what's real and this is what's not real. A lot of discussions lately about what's real and what's not real. And I always go back to the fact that what we consider real in this culture is, what we chase after in this culture, or what we think it means to be a responsible, sensible, rational adult, is a bit, if you really stop and think about it, is a bit baffling. You know, we chase after symbols, basically. And we see them as symbols. They're kind of, although we take certain symbols, we take very, very literally. You know, you're not supposed to take gods literally. Haha, that's so silly. What rational person in this day and age would do that? But you take, you know, these green things, or, you know, whatever country you're in, whatever your currency is, and say, no, this is a real thing. I'm like, no, that's a thing that just stands for wealth. It's not actually anything that has any kind of value. You just decided that it does, or collectively you've agreed that it does. You know, in the same way, you know, you're clearing your house out and you're trying to put stuff on eBay, and it's like, you know, the value that it has is often the value. It's the value that people attach to it. Alex is saying, seems like the longer things go on with guides and spirits, the less I understand, and there's contentment there. It's okay to not fully know. Well, exactly. Yeah. And that's just it, because there's certain things, that is another theme that's come up recently, which is evaluating, understanding without having to evaluate. Okay. That just understanding, feeling that there's something, okay. A good example of this, is I've talked to a lot of people who, when 2025 started and things kind of started to go haywire in a lot of different areas, collectively, and maybe even personally for some people, depending on how they were individually affected. There was a lot of people who said, okay, yeah, we're descending into chaos, but something in me is telling me not to worry. Like, I'm somehow not as upset about this as I should be. And I think they were saying it in the context of, well, there's people saying to me, well, what's wrong with you? You should be upset right now. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And it's just like, okay, it's not that we need to close our eyes and say, like, you know, like I said, like that meme with the dog sitting there, and, you know, and he's smiling, saying everything's fine, and it's on fire around him. Like, it's not that we need to do that. But we also have to say, okay, when it comes to action in a particular situation, we need to listen to our gut. Like, what is our gut telling us to do in a particular situation? How are we expected to respond? Because not everybody's going to respond the same way. Just like these kind of intermediary forces may have different roles, I think we all have different roles too. It's not that everybody has to do the same exact thing, you know? And, you know, so yeah, so we'll see kind of what, you know, where all of this ends up. But it's, let's see, just, okay. So, yeah, we've got a few. I don't know if Kelsey's on this morning or not, but I'm right. Exactly is what Alex is saying. Yeah, just taking some comments off here from I don't know, whoever this idiot is. I'm just, what does that have to do with this live stream? Anyway, but yeah, it's probably just a more bots, but in any case, right, exactly, is what Alex is saying. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of in this space where we are, you know, yeah, we have to learn to have respect and trust for ourselves. And right, and to Alex's point, yeah, sometimes there's things going on, and it's like we feel that it's going to be all right, but we're looking around externally, getting nervous, going, well, can I trust that? You know what I mean? There's the trust factor. Can I trust that? Is this right? Is it, you know, where's the trust factor there? And that is the thing that as humans we don't tend to be very, very good at. And Ellen is on. Hello, good afternoon where you are. And yeah, I have so there's a lot about having to trust yourself, and that's oftentimes a really long and difficult journey, because it goes back to what we're working on with the heart space. When we get a lot of messages saying, you know, clear out the heart space, get to a point where you have your rational side and your more receptive side in line with each other. And again, regardless of what gender anybody is, what they identify with, it doesn't really matter, because we all have these forces. We use the words masculine and feminine. I don't know, maybe in the future we'll have different words for that, but that's, we understand typically what that means. As I've explained in my book, there was a study that was done, a linguistic study, and they decided to they were using a word like key. Okay, so I think the word that they had was key. Now they were talking to people. Now this was of course all done in Europe. It'd be interesting, as I said, to see what would happen in Eastern countries if they were asked the same question, or in other cultures that are not, Western Europe, or but they had people from Germany, and they had people from Spain, and they had people from different places, and they gave them the word a key. And depending on whether or not the gender of that word was masculine or feminine, because we know that you'll see that a lot in European languages where the words are actually gendered, and that actually English words are too. We just don't really notice it. But you do notice it in a language like French, for example, where you have an article la or le, which will tell you, or un or in, which tells you whether it's masculine or feminine. And so it's just so it's so whether or not it's masculine or feminine, and it's but the thing is, when somebody, okay, with the word key, what would happen is if they said to a person, okay, or they hold up the object and they say, describe this to me. Now, in cultures that would say that it was a masculine word, they would say, oh, well, it's hard, it's cold, the metal, like they use all these words that would describe it in a very, it's kind of like it's a tough object. If it was a feminine word, then they would say, oh, well, it's rounded, it's graceful, it's opening, it's this. And they found that was the case. Violin was another word that they had used. And again, depending on the on the actual thing, it actually it would tell you what the depending on the whether or not that was a masculine or feminine word, depended on how they described it. And I think she took the study a little bit further and also said, okay, she had made up words. I think it was like upative and supative, or something usative and supative. I think it was something weird like that. And just told them whether or not it was I think she gave them a gender for the word. And then again, when they would try to describe something as that, it always, masculine things were, hard and solid and this and that. And the feminine things were like curvy and graceful. And, we have this idea of masculine and feminine embedded in us, whether or not we like to think that that's the case. We have this idea, when we talk about this in its broadest context, it's embedded in the way that we think, because we are a people of language. Language is how we communicate. To that point, if you think about certain Aboriginal tribes and so forth, that they say they can communicate telepathically, they're communicating with another part of themselves. They're not communicating with the mouth. They're communicating with another part of themselves. And that's something we think is like, oh, well, people can't do that. That's more of that, psychic nonsense or whatever. Well, no, it's something we are very, very bad at, because we have forgotten how to do it. The other animals communicate with each other without language. I mean, they might have sounds that they make and so forth that we might interpret as a kind of language, but they have other ways of communicating and other ways of knowing what's going on. It's like if you're going to have a big storm or an earthquake or something, you'll notice that animals, like the day before, will get very restless and start doing stuff. Now, we might know through our instruments that something may be coming, but typically, if we didn't have access to that information, we would walk around and go, whoa, what just happened? Like they know you, and that's why people frequently look to nature to say, okay, what's happening? What are what are birds doing? What are the animals doing? What are different ones? If you know how to read those signs, you know something about what's going on in your environment. And we do everything in a very technological way. We do everything with our minds, and we think that that's the best way to do it. But the very strong message here is like, no, you've got to learn to get back into balance with yourself. And this is what I mean when I say it's so important to balance masculine and feminine energy. People are kind of like, okay, so you have the school about feminine stuff, like, whatever. And I'm like, but no. And it's like I explained yesterday on Katonia. I had a post about this, because a lot of people have questions about that. They're like, oh, well, maybe I'm just not interested in studying women's stuff right now. I'm like, no, School of Feminine Myth is not feminine stuff. Not girly stuff, quote unquote, or whatever. It's not, that's not the sense of it. It's, or even feminist stuff. The sense of it is, you know, what are we doing with these energies in ourselves? Because how we respond to those unconsciously, no matter what we say, how do we respond to those energies unconsciously? How are we interpreting that? And how do you get to a point where you're able to embrace that feminine that is dark because it's hidden? It's the weaker part of ourselves. It's in shadow. It's the thing that we go, oh, no rational person would trust that, right? But you know, but why should we trust the external system that we've been brought up in? People say, well, we need a systemic change. I'm like, okay, then you got to get past this, all these swords, right? In tarot, you got to get past all of these thoughts. You got to get past all these swords. And you know, sometimes there's no way. The way to do that is not to, you know, the way that you get around that is not necessarily to fight fire with fire, but that's a lot of times what we do. That's what, when they talk about women becoming more masculine, it's more the idea that we, you know, when people pull out the sword, we pull out the sword, you know, and we're just like, okay, you know, we're going to have a battle on this same level. And sometimes that's not the answer, you know. Like I said, martial arts can teach you a lot about using feminine energy to defeat your opponent. Sometimes it's not about directly engaging. Sometimes it's about stepping out of the way. Sometimes it's about kind of flowing in and doing, you know, the sneak attack. But again, does it always have to be an attack too? Because our thoughts are attacking us all the time, I think we always feel like we're under attack. That's, you know, I don't know. These are just kind of random. I know I'm kind of moving around, but with these kind of thoughts, but I'm trying to talk a little bit about, I think if I'm trying to try to unify or summarize what it is that I'm trying to say this morning, I think it's more that we are, you know, okay, there's a talk about getting back in balance. Getting back in balance means learning to trust ourselves and having respect for ourselves too, which I think are some of the hallmarks of Venus and Mercury retrograde. We're going back and having corrective action in terms of thought, in terms of speech, and in terms of how we feel. And a lot of this South Node energy, especially, you know, wherever it is for us, it says that harem society belittles psychic gifts, etc. You have to be quite underhand in a way, is what Ellen's saying. Well, you're right, because a lot of people say, you know, they treat psychic gifts as like, oh, well, you're crazy, or you're delusional, or you're, you know, or that's just for, you know, people who are, you know, we tend to think of it Piscean energy that as very ungrounded, right? Oh, you need to always, and yes, I mean, you do want to be grounded, but that's the balancing act, right? But no, you're right. When you have an intuition about something, back in the 70s, what they used to do, and I'm going to do our reading right now while I'm talking to you. Back in the 70s, they used to actually have a registry of things like people's dreams or people's predictions. I don't know if they keep these things up anymore in any kind of official way, but this was also the time when there was more study of things like, you know, psychic gifts, you know, and it's not that it doesn't still go on. There is a parapsychological association that does exist, although it tends to be very, very science heavy because, I mean, and again, for the reason Ellen's exactly saying here is that people, if you say you're doing that, they say, oh, well, that's not serious scientific research. We're not going to pay for that, right? But they used to keep these things because, to me, you know, it's the proof's in the pudding, right? It's like, how do you know, how many times if you're, the more that's why I think we tell people when you're developing your intuition to keep track of your predictions, to keep a notebook or keep a diary or keep something, because, you know, if things happen and you think, didn't I have a feeling about this? You can go back and say, yeah, my instinct on that was right. Like the externals didn't look that way, but my instinct was right. And sometimes that's the only way to satisfy the mind that the rest of that is trustworthy, by seeing that external validation. The bigger challenge is to be able to validate our feelings and be solid in ourselves and trust what our gut's telling us, in spite of what other people may tell us, or, you know, the way people try to sway us one way or the other. But sometimes people are being swayed by bad information, and it's like, okay, well, if something's kind of like, look, don't just trust what you see with your eyes. You have other senses. You have other ways of doing things. And that may be the rut that we're being called to get out of. Like, just, okay, it's not that all that has to go away, but you might want to put that aside and say, okay, let's go with what's felt here, because this is where that balancing act comes in. Because the mind always wants to control things, right? We always feel like, well, okay, I'm going to become more spiritual by saying these words over and over again, or by thinking this, and it's like, that's only going to get you so far, because you're still kind of trapped in however the mind has analyzed and interpreted what's going on, right? So anyway, here's our reading for today. Center card, the burden. Yeah, it's a 6 of Swords, but this is about dropping the burdens of other people, dropping expectations. I think we got the 11th house card the other day in kind of a challenging spot. And yeah, it's like not letting the wider world cause you to distrust yourself, right? And also the sense that we are not obliged to take on the burdens of other people. We do not need to have people's approval. We do not, in order to go ahead with a project, or to go ahead, or to believe something, or to feel something. I mean, yes, people may or may agree or disagree with you, but we don't need other people's approval to have our identities. A lot of times our identities are constructed on, or are what we think of, especially with women, because we tend to think that, if this person wants to put this burden on me, that if I'm a good person, then I'm going to help them, right? But sometimes it's like, oh, well, like my dad used to do. Thanks, that's a good reminder is what Suda's saying. Yeah, sometimes like my dad used to say, like he would take his pipe out of his mouth and go, it's too bad, and then he'd just move on. Like, well, I don't, okay. I mean, I'm sorry for you, and I mean, it's I wish you well. I hope everything works out, but it doesn't oblige us to take things on. Now, the inner feeling of which we're unaware is the 2 of Pentacles, moment to moment. Okay, again, the guy hopping from one rock to the next, one step at a time. One step at a time, like carrying a heavy suitcase on a moving train. We can put it down and get to the same place. Yes, that's Amma, right? I think she had said something like that. Yes, yeah. Carrying, you can put it down, and yeah, you don't have to drag it around with you, right? Exactly. And so we're living moment to moment here, and so this is internally what we're kind of trying to do. And 2 of Pentacles, don't forget, is also about juggling too, like where we've got multiple balls in the air, and it may just be that we have to focus on one thing at a time, and maybe unconsciously that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get into the flow. Externally, what we're aware, 6 of Cups. Now, okay, they're calling this the dream card. Yep. This is the card of the past. This has been coming up a lot in any version of tarot. 6 of Cups. The problem is the past, and the problem is our attachment to the past and our dream of what should have been, or if I hang on to it, what it might become, or what it might turn into. I mean, it's yeah, I mean, this sometimes can be a card of playful nostalgia and feeling good about the past. Again, it's not that we have to throw our past away and now it's bad all of a sudden, but you don't want to be living there, because that's not where you are right now, right? 2 6s here too, I've noticed. So we got this 6 energy is this energy of trying to move on from stuff. 5 of Cups is actually about, mourning the past. 6 of Cups is about, you're past that, but now you're kind of looking back at it. So, and actually, this is card 15, which also adds up to 6. This is the Devil card, right? This is conditioning. Just like I said, breaking down our conditioning, breaking down this feeling that, we have to do what the rest of the crowd does. Well, I can't. Stop hitting the nail on the head with the past card is what Suda's saying. I'll try to be less accurate next time. But yeah, this is 6, and 6, by the way, is the card of the Lovers, right? What are we talking about? Libra energy or Gemini energy, even keeping things in balance, right? Yeah, this balancing act means getting rid of other people's stuff. Stop fantasizing about the past. People romanticize the past. They always romanticize it as being somehow better than what it is, or say, oh, if it went this way instead, it would have been better. It is what it is. You leave it there and you live in the present. This is what your soul's trying to do, is trying to live in the present, right? So you don't have to do what the rest of the sheep are doing here, right? You don't have to be, that's where the attachment comes in. That's the social attachment. I need to be like the group that I'm in. I want to be accepted. And then Joanne says, as Edna Mode says, don't look back, darling, it detracts from the now. Yeah, right. It's exactly. And our outcome card. So what's the outcome here? 3 of Pentacles, okay, which is in this card, this is the guidance card. Again, just let go and let yourself be guided, because I think probably most people here on the live stream, either you, and again, you can look at that 2 ways. You can say, I have an external guide who's helping me, and I'm going to trust them, you know, which is part of it. But I think a big part of this too is also trusting yourself. And I feel like your external guides to some degree are going to be tied up with whatever that, they like to use the term higher self. People know that I don't like higher or lower, highest good, this, that. I'm not a fan of those words. But what Jung would have called the self with a capital S. Like that's the authentic essence of ourselves. That's what guides us. Okay. And like I said, if we have a helpful spirit guide, they are going to try to point us in that direction. Whether they're a projection of that or not, it is kind of irrelevant. It's just, it's pointing you in that direction. And so, yeah, we need to trust that guidance. And a lot of times that the way we steer in that ship is coming from either, like I said, it's either coming from your solar plexus energy, it's coming from the sacrum. It may just be in how you're interpreting the world around you, but whatever it is, it's like getting in touch with that, getting in touch, trying to understand and not having the mind come in and go, but what does it all mean? Maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it's just something you just have to go along with and see, because you'll find that if you just go along with that, that unconsciously you'll look back and go, oh, look at that. I did all the right things and I didn't even know I was doing the right things, you know? Okay, so what is our, I'm going to pull one more card for today. We are over time, but Steadying from the Essential Oracle, Essential Oil Oracle deck. So the key word is anchor. And the trigger statement is, I'm not ready for what comes next. Okay. And that's part of this too. Everyone's like, oh, what's coming next? The true statement is, I take it one step at a time. Although things are shifting quickly, be present and know that this is part of a greater plan. So there you go. If that doesn't summarize what I've been talking about today. So yeah, I hope I wasn't going all over the place, but that is the way my mind works. I kind of go from one connection and jump from one to the other. So hopefully in the end, all of that came together and made sense. I hope you all have a great Tuesday. Like I said, I have some things going on this morning. So, you know, we will see where we end up with everything today from myself. But I hope everybody here has a good day. And I hope that the changes come in, prove to be, well, all the truth here. All the truth here. Thank you, Suda. Yeah, we'll see what everything is. Boom shakalaka. Yeah, to quote Joanne, right? Yeah, it's we're definitely moving into a new space, but Azrael's just kind of like, stop hanging on to the past already. Brilliant, thank you. Oh, you're welcome, Ellen, and it was good to see you on here this morning as well, or this afternoon in your case. And thank you. You are welcome. And yeah, everybody have a great day. And I will see you all again tomorrow morning. I just got to remember to schedule it this time, but I'll see you tomorrow morning. One step at a time, Alistair. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome, Alistair. And absolutely, Ellen. So take care.